Hello, Internet friends and family. Welcome back to Starkey Forum Said. So here it is. This is Caroline, the White House Secretary of Press Secretary. She's going to give you about a 13-minute run of what you can expect to happen starting tomorrow with the Trump administration. One of the things I love most about her is she is no nonsense, but just to give you a quick rundown, 25% tariff on Canada imports, 25% tariff on Mexican imports, and a 10% tariff on Chinese imports start tomorrow. And again, the Colombian president is now saying he's not going to take these criminal illegals back. So you're definitely going to want to watch this all the way through. It's some very important information. Instead of getting your news from secondary sources, learn to get it from a primary source, and that is exactly what this is. Love you guys. Remember, like, comment, and subscribe.
In details that aren't relevant at all to the job description, I think that deteriorates the morale of people in this industry. And if you talk to people in this industry, they'll tell you that. In fact, many of them filed a lawsuit against the FAA a couple of years ago under Joe Biden's administration because they were denied positions because of this DEI hiring practice that was putting identity politics over merit and skills. That's unacceptable. And I think just to put a fine point on this, because this is the third or fourth question I've answered on this subject, when you are flying on an airplane with your loved ones, which every one of us in this room has, do you pray that your plane lands safely and gets you to your destination? Or do you pray that the pilot has a certain skin color? I think we all know the answer to that question. And as President Trump said yesterday, it's common sense. Rob Crilly.
Yeah, I'd just like to follow up on that last question, actually. Has there been any sort of assurance from the FAA that they will immediately improve staffing levels, given the reports of not normal staffing levels on Wednesday?
Oh, absolutely. You had Secretary Duffy here yesterday at the White House at this podium saying that he is on it, and we can all trust that he definitely will be. John Decker.
Thanks a lot, Carol. You followed me, right?
Yes, I did.
Thank you very much.
As long as your name's still John Decker.
It is, absolutely. Thank you. The president's meeting today with the founder and CEO of Nvidia. What is that meeting concerning, and who sought that meeting?
I don't have details on this. It's a private meeting. It will take place at 2:30 p.m. I'll try to get there in time, and I can let you know after. How's that?
On Guantanamo Bay, can you give more details about setting up that detention facility at Gitmo? How will that come about? What's the timing in terms of standing it up? And of course, this has happened before during the Clinton administration.
Yeah, that's right.
Detainees of Cuban and Haitian descent were both detained at Guantanamo. Are you looking at that model in setting up this detention facility?
Secretary Hegseth, I believe, was on television this morning answering this question, and he said that the Department of Defense is already on it. He has directed his agency to ensure that Gitmo is increasing their capacity for beds, and that's exactly what President Trump's executive order did. It directed Secretary Hegseth and also Secretary Noem to expand the Migrant Operations Center at the Naval Station to provide for this extra detention space. And as Secretary Hegseth confirmed this morning, that operation is underway. Sure.
Caroline, on the tariffs, can you clarify whether those will actually be going into effect tomorrow, or
Yes.
whether there might be some lead time?
Yes.
And are those, they will be going into effect?
Correct.
And are those meant to be in place long term, or is there a scenario in which Canada, Mexico, and China can offer concessions and then they would be removed?
At this point, the president has made it very clear those tariffs are going to be implemented and in effect. If the president at any time decides to roll back those tariffs, I'll leave it to him to make that decision. But starting tomorrow, those tariffs will be in place. Sure.
Thanks, Caroline.
Yes.
Can you confirm a report by our friends at the Daily Mail that the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is going to be visiting the White House in February? And also, if I may, do you have any more details on Netanyahu's visit here next week?
Sure. I have not seen that report about the prime minister. I can go check back with our friends at the National Security Council and get back to you on that. I can confirm that Prime Minister Netanyahu will be here on Tuesday, February 4th, for a working meeting and visit with the president. And I'm sure you will all be here, very excited to cover that visit. Sure. Daniel. You're welcome.
Back on the Guantanamo Bay subject, specifically, obviously, why does the president feel like that's the best location or a good location to make sure that Americans are safe from violent, illegal migrant crime?
Well, it's a really good question. And the memorandum that he signed The order that he signed builds on his previous executive actions, obviously, to secure our southern border and deport illegal criminals from the interior of our country. We know that we have an issue with detention space here in the interior, which is a big reason why Congress needs to pass this reconciliation package as quickly as possible to ensure that DHS and ICE have the funding they need to detain these individuals that the administration is very swiftly rounding up and deporting, arresting and deporting these illegal immigrant criminals. And so the president feels it's an appropriate place. Taxpayers are already funding it. The space is there. Why not use it? And the Secretary of Defense, as I said, is working on that as we speak. Sure. Yes.
Thank you so much for having me here and answering a question. So I want to talk more about the success that ICE is having finding these violent criminal aliens, some of the big sexual predators. But my friend Ben Bergquam reports that the Chicago mayor and the Illinois governor are preventing ICE agents from going into jails and prisons to enforce detainers against illegal aliens. In Maryland, the Attorney General has also put out a memo hindering local police cooperation with ICE. Does the administration have any comment on leftist state and local officials defying ICE and Trump's deportation efforts?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting that Democrat officials in these cities who have been completely overrun and overwhelmed by illegal immigrant criminals would refuse support and help to cure this problem that has especially taken over their cities. I guess they don't want to admit they've been wrong with their sanctuary city policies. I'm not sure. You'll have to ask them about their intentions, but they would be very wise to comply with this administration because this administration is hell-bent on enforcing our nation's immigration laws. And this administration will continue to arrest and detain and deport illegal migrant criminals. And what we won't do is defy our nation's immigration laws like the previous administration who had these orders of removal on illegal immigrants across the country and were refusing to execute on them. We will continue to remove illegal criminals from our nation's interior.
Are these sanctuary city leaders, are they violating law?
I would certainly think so. I'd have to check back on which specific law they're violating, but certainly if they're not enforcing our nation's immigrations law, sounds like they are breaking the law. And I would also add that their constituents don't approve of that. You've seen residents in Chicago show up at their city council meetings infuriated with their leadership in that city because they are working very hard to provide for their families. They want public safety and law and order, and their officials have abandoned those very basic American principles in these cities. And the American people want law and order. It's, again, an overwhelmingly popular policy to deport illegal criminals from our nation's interior, and this administration will continue to affect that goal. Sure.
A question on Colombia. We just interviewed Colombian President Gustavo Petro, and he insisted that he's not going to take any Colombian deportee from the U.S. if they arrive in South America handcuffed. How this administration responds to that?
When did the Colombian president make those remarks?
Today. For
Okay.
an interview with us at Univision.
Well, I will share those with the president of the United States, and I will get back to you on his response.
What
Sure.
happens if Nicolás Maduro?
Caroline, there are more than 150,000 disabled Americans who are working today. The president talked a lot yesterday about hiring the best and the brightest to work in the federal government. Safety aside, does he believe that disabled people do have a place to work in the federal government? And does he also support the current protections for disabled people working in the private sector as well?
The president has made it very clear that this is a common sense solution to solving some of the problems that we have seen at the Federal Aviation Administration and also when it comes to many of the federal agencies across our government. People should not be hired based on their disabilities, based on their skin color, their gender, their race. None of that matters. What matters to this president and this administration is how well you can do your job. And the American people agree with that sentiment. So it's about competence, skill, and merit. And so the president is focused on ensuring that the most competent individuals, the best and the brightest in this country, are in positions in this federal government, especially when it comes to public safety. Can't overemphasize the importance of those jobs. Sure.
Caroline. So as follow-up on her question before, President Trump is holding China accountable on fentanyl by ramping up tariffs. So how is President Trump planning to hold China accountable on COVID origins?
I haven't spoken to the president about the COVID origins specifically in regards to any actions he may or may not take when it comes to China. But as I have previewed quite a few times today, he will be implementing a 10% tariff on China tomorrow. Sure. Hi.
Has the president made up his mind about a timeline for tariffs on the EU?
No, he has not.
Will it be a one-size-fit-all, or will it be differentiated among governments?
I won't get ahead of the president on tariffs when it comes to the European Union. What I can tell you, again, is that the president will be implementing 25% on Canada, 25% on Mexico, 10% on China tomorrow for the reasons that I have repeatedly laid out in this briefing.
Thank you, Caroline. Two quick questions on foreign policy, and then one very long and tedious and ponderous Rosen question thereafter. First, on Iran, we've heard very little about the president's forthcoming Iran policy besides his determination to prevent that nation from achieving a nuclear weapons capability. Is it the president's objective, short of the use of U.S. military force, to use the broad array of his powers to try to hasten the end of the Iranian regime?
I think the president has actually made his position on Iran very clear. And he made that clear when there were the negotiations about the ceasefire, which we know obviously is now in place, and the deadline on that ceasefire has continued. He said that Hamas and Iranian-backed terrorists would have hell to pay if that ceasefire didn't move forward. And then quickly thereafter, it did. I also do have news on the hostage front, which I'm very surprised nobody asked about this because it is big news story. And the White House applauds the release of 8 additional hostages from Hamas captivity, thanks to the ceasefire deal secured by President Trump. 3 Israeli and 5 Thai nationals are being reunited with their families and their loved ones after being held in unspeakable conditions for over 15 months. And the president remains committed to the release of all remaining hostages, and they should have never been taken by the brutal terrorist group Hamas in the first place. And I think President Trump's working meeting with the Israeli prime minister next week emphasizes his continued support for Israel and ensuring that brutal terrorists in that region have hell to pay.